And good morning, everyone, and welcome to Prepper Talk Radio here on AM 630 K-Talk. And I am Shane, and I'm here with Scott, and we have a fabulous guest today who is on hold. But we want to get through the particulars here first of all. We are, of course, grateful to our sponsor, Survival Medical, survival-medical.com, the only first aid kit tougher than nature. Oh, excuse me. The only first aid kit, let me try that again, tougher than nature. Had a little choke up here.
I can tell.
Yes. That happens to me sometimes. Oh, let me turn you on. Sorry. There you go.
Oh, there we go. Now we're working.
Now we're working. So we are today talking about, I guess you'd call it another survival 101, prepping 101 kind
a little
of.
higher level.
Definitely higher level. Maybe 201 or whatever.
201, there we go.
But and maybe we'll get into some deeper stuff as well. But I wanted to, I guess, first of all, want to step away from politics. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Paul had a great show, and I'm sure we'll have some great shows after us as well. But it's just a lot about Trump and a lot about politics. Let's step back, take a break, talk about the stuff that we can do to better prepare ourselves.
Yeah. So today it's all prepping, no politics. So we want to pull everyone off that mindset and want to start thinking about self-awareness, situational awareness. And we've got a pretty awesome guest, good friend of ours.
Yes.
Who, he's a stud. He's been doing wilderness survival, off-grid living, on-grid living, worked with former police departments in New Mexico, runs Urban Survivors.
As you can see, I have a page here of his resume. Are you there, Stan?
Hello. Good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you, Stan? Wish you were in the studio with us.
Yeah, Mother Nature threw me a round of snow, and it wasn't really the snow that stopped me because I can get through any storm, believe me, but it was the other drivers.
Yes. That's usually the problem.
Well, Stan, thank you so much for joining us today. We're, even on the phone, we're excited to have you and excited to tap into that wealth of knowledge that you have.
Okay, well, I can share what I know. I wouldn't say it's a wealth of knowledge because my favorite slogan is I'm a master of a few, but student of all, so we can all learn from each other.
Fantastic. Very cool. Master of few. And we do know that you are a master of, you have, 7 black belts? Is that correct?
6, but
Six,
if you count my Lean Six Sigma black belt, then I guess 7.
Let's count that one because that's pretty impressive as well.
It works for me. Now, Stan has quite a background here. If we were just to talk about his resume, we would take the entire show just to talk about his resume. The first time I met Stan, I was taken back. This man is fit. Holy cow, he is. He takes care of himself. I mean, and that's obviously what martial arts really entails is fitness, and we can talk about that a little bit as well. But and of course, when I think about defense or self-defense or home defense, the first thing that comes to my mind are weapons. And you are also, would you consider yourself a master of weapons as well?
Yes, I have studied a lot of weapons. I worked in the weapons program for 17 years for the federal government. Mm-hmm. And that consists of all manner of weapons, from conventional to wave weapons to nuclear to non-nuclear, things that go thump in the night. Yeah. That's what we worked on. So it was really an exciting career to work on the cutting edge of technology. Everything from the bunker busters to the javelin, which is so readily utilized by our armed services. Then, of course, to the nukes and our wave weapons were just coming out before I left there. So a lot of the products that are just rolling out now were in development a long time ago, and it was kind of fun.
Nice. Very cool. So a few other things I wanted to bring up. I know I get ahead of myself, and those of you who listen to the show realize that. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about Stan's background. When he said that nothing will stop him from getting here other than other drivers, he means it. This guy, he has built one of the first 6x6 trucks out there.
Jeeps.
But yeah, well,
it wasn't really
one of the first, but definitely a hobby of mine was to do a lot of off-roading. My wife and I would actually compete and race off-road trucks, and then I tried out some six-wheel drive. and Dodge came out with a T-Rex prototype, six-wheel drive truck, and I said, I've got to have one. They canceled the project when Daimler took over, so I said, fine, I'll build my own. They sponsored me, and we competed with our first six-wheel drive truck, which was called the Dodge T-Rex. It's lime green. It's all over the internet. And then I started building some more. So I've built quite a few 6x6 off-road rigs, including the Zombie Killer, which will be featured at PrepperCon coming up.
Right.
Full of armaments, machine guns, rocket launchers, 300-pound pull crossbow, armor-piercing crossbow with explosive bolts, of course.
Of course.
That'll be at PrepperCon.
I need to add one to the Forerunner Evader. You need to help me out with that.
Oh, heck yeah. If you want to put weapons on it, give me a call. We'll build some mounts. We'll throw a quad deuce on it. How about that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Nothing
do we need to cut a hole in the roof for that?
Yeah, nothing says hello like 4 50 caliber machine guns going bah, 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 bah.
Oh, and let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about PrepperCon. It's coming up sooner than, it's coming up so fast. I mean, it's all of a sudden it's going to be here.
Yep, April 21st and 22nd. We're going to be doing a little different format this year. So Friday, it's noon till 10. Those are the hours we're open. That way we can get more people in after work and have a lot more things for you to do. And then on Saturday, same hours as the year before. It's 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. We're going to give around, I think, 250 of our survival cards away to the first 250 that are through the doors. Stan's going to be running our hand-to-hand area as well as a knife fighting tournament like last year, and I'll let Stan kind of explain that more in a minute. And then we're working on enhancing the shoot house. We had it last year, but Stan's team's going to be enhancing that this year with some real scenario-driven trainings. So, Stan, if you want to kind of talk about a little bit about last year's knife fight, the tournament, and kind of what you guys did at PrepperCon, and I guess we'll lead that off into the conversation today.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's exactly what we'll be doing. The thing is I go back to the point is so many of us get lulled into a false sense of security when we think that, oh, hey, I pack a gun, I'm safe. It's as if when you put a gun around your belt, there's some sort of magical force field that protects you from all evil. And if I had $1 for every time some guy said to me that, oh, well, if I'm confronted with a bad guy, I'm just going to shoot him. If I had $1 for every time I heard that, I'd be a rich man, because it's false sense of security. You have to have the time and distance to draw. So you need to be experienced in not only hand defense, but in also other weapons of opportunity. Knives are plentiful, so we cover knives. Knives, actually, when you get to close quarters combat, there's nothing more wicked than a good knife.
Yeah.
I mean, much more effective, actually, than a pistol. And we go into that in our class.
Yeah,
so that's why we... Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, just to clarify, you're not saying don't carry a gun.
Oh, yeah, do carry a gun.
Right, but also carry a knife and then be trained.
Yeah, it's like why are Leathermans so popular? Swiss knives are so popular. Well, it's more than just a blade. It's got a blade. It's got a tweezers. It's got a magnifying glass. It's got a wrench. It's got scissors. It's got all sorts of tools. Well, that's what we need to be. We need to be the Swiss knives or Leathermans of preparedness. If you rely on one form of defense, you are guaranteed to die by another form of offense.
That's a really great point. I mean, I've actually been to one of your classes. You put on a class for us, and I took my wife, and she was a little bit trepidatious at the beginning. She was like, "Oh, I don't know."
It was a little scary at first, definitely.
And no, this is before we even got there.
Oh, right. Okay.
She's like, "Oh, I don't know about this." She's like, "I kind of want to learn this, but I don't know." And then we get there, and it's fun because Stan, you're just so engaging and so laid back, matter of factly, but strict on adherence to how to do things correctly.
And when he gets a knife in his hands, he's quite scary.
Oh yeah, and it was great because not only did we go over knife fighting and mostly from the defensive aspects, but we also talked about how defending your gun, making sure people aren't grabbing for it, also disarming someone with a gun. And my wife was taking me down by the end of the couple of hours that we were there. That was very empowering for her as well as for me, and I'm a lot more comfortable. And a lot more confident, not just in myself, but also in my wife and her ability. And I think it was one of the most empowering things she's done because it's given her that confidence. Not just, hey, I can do this, but I know how to do this. And so, Stan, you were phenomenal in that training, and I know one of my brother-in-laws actually was in your knife fighting tournament, and he was blown away at what he learned in that short demonstration that you gave him.
Yeah, that's the point, is that we try and make it simple. Now, I don't discredit the traditional martial arts because that's where I was raised. Again, having 6 black belts in multiple different types of styles. And there's a discipline that can be learned. It's great for kids. But what we've done is what Bruce Lee always talked about, is strip away all that is useless and just focus on what works for that individual. So each one of us have a different ability to different physical ability, different mental ability, and so not everything is going to work for each individual. We're not cookie cutters.
Right.
So the point is we focus on making it simple and making it effective. And so we've developed a combat system that has been used by police departments and military, and we have gone around the country in teaching these in seminars. In fact, back in the late 90s and early 2000s, we were always out with the Soldier of Fortune, and we even got opportunity to train some French foreign legionnaires. We've trained it to military personnel, and the coolest part, the most rewarding thing for me, is knowing that it works. And that's why I went into law enforcement aside from the weapons program, because I wanted to make sure that what we taught worked on the streets, and it does. One of my students became an airborne ranger, was in special operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I received a phone call from this guy who became my best friend. And he was in tears, and I said, are you hurt? Did you get hit? And he said, no, Stan, you saved my life today. And, then I started tearing up because he's such a good friend. And I said, what happened? He said, well, we were doing house clearings in Baghdad, and it went down to hand-to-hand combat. I kicked open a door. I got shot. My jacket, of course, stopped the bullet to drop me to the ground. The guy jumped on top of me to finish me off, and then it was on. And he says, I took him out with my bare hands.
Wow.
I mean, to know, very empowering. And then a few months later, another one of my students, a Marine in Afghanistan, called me up and said, Stan, he said the same thing. He said, you saved my life. It was 2-on-1, hand-to-hand. I took them both out. I was like, wow, okay. All right. That reinforces, that's what we try to do, is make it simple yet effective.
Yeah.
And get out of all the fluff. Focus on the technique.
Before we come up on a break here, where we only have another minute or so left, we've got a caller calling in. We'll try and take that call after the break here if you want to call back in. But one thing that I think people need to realize is when you send their kids to your karate class, that is designed to take as long as possible to milk as much money out of you to advance you through these belts, which is not a traditional martial arts system. Am I correct there, Stan?
Correct. Yeah, we ran a very traditional school back in Santa Fe, and the belt system is kind of an American invention. And so suddenly I realized that we were running a puppy mill. We were just cranking students out, and whether they were good or not, they paid the money, and here's your belt. And that's when my sensei and I broke away from that federation, and we started our own school, going back to the roots of real combat martial arts. And we began digging up the good stuff. Now, also, the insurance companies control the martial arts. When we became part of the federation, which you have to become to get insured, they sent us a booklet of things that we could and could not teach. And also they minimized the amount of actual hand-to-hand and actual physical contact. It's becoming like the YMCA. Yes. And if you want to have insurance, you got to follow their rules.
That makes perfect sense. And here comes our music, and you're listening to Prepper Talk Radio here on AM 630 K-Talk. And our sponsor, of course, is Survival Medical, survival-medical.com. The only first aid kits designed to last up to 20 years. We'll catch you on the other side of the break. And you're listening to Shane and Scott here on Prepper Talk Radio. Thank you for tuning in. We are talking today with Stan Pruett. of a urban survivors. He does a lot of things in addition to this, but he is one tough guy, and I absolutely trust everything he says. And now, before we get started here, Stan, I'm going to bring on a caller who wants to do a little praise for you, if that's all right with you.
Sure.
Are you there? You're live on K-Talk. Go ahead. Hello, caller. Are you there? Maybe I had him on. We'll just leave that open and see if he just pipes up here. But back to our conversation about self-defense. We were talking about, I guess, traditional martial arts compared to maybe what you do.
Yeah. So once again, we've made it simple. We've made it effective. And then the beauty of working with the federal government in the weapons program is that we worked 4/10, so we had every Friday off. And then on the side, I ran this martial arts training center, and where we had not only a dojo, but we had several square miles of forest where we did tactical training, team training with paintball guns and stuff like that. We had an old water treatment plant that we would practice close quarters combat and room clearing, house clearing, building clearing, that kind of stuff. So we worked with a lot of anti-terrorism SWAT teams and police departments. And then I myself, since I had every Friday off, I decided to put myself through the New Mexico State Police Academy and become a certified police officer. And I donated my time on Fridays and on the weekends and whenever they had call for me. I had a pager, they'd call me when they did drug raids. And so I donated my time to the New Mexico State Police through the New Mexico Mounted Patrol. Now, the beauty of that was to get out on the street and make sure that this stuff worked. And sure enough, it did. We had a lot of good times and bad times. I've been shot at. I've been attacked multiple times. I've been in 2 real knife fights. Both times one time I didn't have a knife, and it was just me against another individual. But one time on duty, while I came up to a car, a gentleman jumped out of the car with a knife and tried to stick it through my Kevlar vest. Now, Kevlar, Spectra, bulletproof vests do not stop knives. They're a blunt trauma stopping power, but they don't stop cutting-edge weapons. And so he tried to stick that into me. And the point is, you want to get to the point where you don't just do martial arts or your self-defense every here and there, but you make it part of your body. When you do some motions 1,500 times, it becomes motor memory. If you do something 15,000 times, it becomes reflex memory. So you just respond. And luckily for me, that's what happened. This guy came at me, and I just responded. And in a blink of an eye, it was over, and he was flattened out on the pavement, and I was standing above him, and I was like, whoa, it works. So you do need to make a conscious effort to take it seriously.
And I guess that makes a lot of sense for me. When you're practicing something, you can't necessarily practice dozens of different types of moves and such, because it's hard to get those 15,000 repetitions to grain that in. So I guess, like you say, the more you keep it simple, the more natural that becomes.
Exactly, and also it's a state of mind. The mind is the greatest weapon, and so your sense of awareness, your sense of being, and your sense of observation will help you in any situation. And we're all familiar with UDA: observe, orient, decide, and act. That's so true. You observe something, you orient yourself, and then you make a decision to act. And when you act, there's 3 F's that I always talk about. You act first, with forced, and fast. So first, force, and fast. You can't hesitate. You can't be halfway into whatever you're doing. You've got to go for it. Even if you don't have any martial arts training, if you commit to acting, go for it. Go wild and crazy on them, and that will help you out. Don't think that adrenaline is going to save the day. It actually slowers your reflexes.
You lose your
slowers
control
your time.
Of your fine motor skills.
Exactly. It's adrenaline. People always say, "Well, yeah, if I get in a fight, I'll wait till the adrenaline kicks in and I'll lift a bus up and smash them." That kind of stuff. We don't turn into Hulks. Adrenaline is good for flight, but not very good for fight.
You have to.
It also,
to focus it,
Yeah, it also hinders your brain processing. So when we train police officers and operators, the point is that you put them under duress a lot, so they get used to it. Because the first time you're under duress and suddenly there's something bad happening and the adrenaline starts flowing, your brain shuts down back to the primitive brain, back to that fight or flight, and you stop thinking out of your frontal lobes. Where operators and SWAT teams and so forth, we put them under duress so much that they get accustomed to it, that they stay in the frontal lobe. So their logic processor is still working, their reasoning processor is still working, and they can calculate and plan what they're going to do in any situation. And that's what makes them combat effective. Other people who have not, been in that kind of environment, suddenly the shots start ringing out, and they're like, "Oh crap!" and they fall to the ground and freeze up, or they run, right? And running is good, of course.
And that's, I guess, for most people, that should be your first line of defense is the flight.
Don't be there. Yep, exactly. We preach that. That's the first rule of self-defense. Don't be there. If you can avoid confrontation, avoid it. People often ask me, especially here in Utah, since this is a very heavy concealed carry state, they say, "Stan, what's going to happen if you're in a mall and there's an active shooter? What would you do?" And my first response is, well, beware of all the other shooters that are suddenly going to pop out. And that is a huge fear here in a state where you have all these people that are concealed carry, card holders. And how much range time do they have? Yeah. How good are they at fighting under duress in a serious situation? I'm more worried about being shot by all the other locos who suddenly realize, "Oh, it's an active shooter. My moment has come. I finally get to unleash my Colt 45. Oh, the glory!" And now you're going to have so much crossfire because you're going to have 15 different people shooting at a target that they're not sure of, and then they're going to see other people with guns, and it's just going to be absolute chaos and mayhem.
I think one of the interesting points that you bring up is in Utah there are a lot of concealed carriers, right? And what I find interesting is there are more concealed carry permits than actual people carrying. When I was in the real estate business full time, people would find out I carry, and they're like, "Oh, wow, do you have your concealed carry permit?" And I'm like, "Well, duh." And then I'd get this response a lot of times, "Oh, I've got one. I just don't carry all the time." And I'm like, "Well, okay, that's fine, but what's your range time?" Okay, well, that's fine, but what's your hand-to-hand training? What else are you doing? Because especially in that industry, women are more concerned because when they go do showings with a stranger, they're putting themselves in harm's way.
Exactly.
Unknowingly.
That's a great point.
And one of the sales pitches that gets me pissed off more than anything is a lot of these concealed carry classes will be like, "Oh, yeah, get your concealed carry." If you're a real estate agent, they'll come and they'll actually talk to the different offices. Get your concealed carry permit so that, if you are stuck in that situation, you can whip out your gun and take care of business. And I kind of laugh at how absurdly stupid that is because if they're in that situation, they're already in a position where they've got less than 21 feet to be able to draw and acquire their target. So now they're in a 3 to 5 foot radius of someone else, and they're in trouble because they have no other training. There's no other way for them to defend themselves, and so they rely on this, "I've got a gun, I'm safe" mentality. Well, now that gun is now their perp's gun.
It's their crutch.
It's not even a crutch. It's the other guy's gun because they don't have any other training to keep it.
Exactly. That's the point. Is that so many people carry, but they don't know how to deploy the weapon. They don't know how to protect the weapon because it can be an asset and it can be a liability in close quarters combat. Now, I'm glad you brought up that story because I actually have been invited to 4 different real estate boards to teach hand-to-hand. The first time I got invited was because a woman here in Utah was sexually assaulted while showing a home. She was showing a home to a couple. Okay, so she thought it was safe. And so she's going from home to home showing these homes, and then they got to this one home, and the wife stayed in the car. She went into the house to show the husband this house because the wife acted disinterested in the particular house. But this man went in, and, of course, One, situational awareness was not in play. Mm-hmm. She walked into the master bedroom to show the master bedroom. She walked in first. Now she has no egress. She's just put herself in a corner. Who cares that she has a pistol in her purse? She's got her concealed carry in her purse. She goes to open up the closets and show the large walk-in closets. She turns around and boom, he's there. He throws her on the bed, sexually assaults her. Where's her gun?
In her purse.
What can you do? Exactly. Even if she could get to it, she can't. She's pinned down to the bed being sexually assaulted. Now, I won't give you all the gory details, but she happened to be in one of my classes, and she was absolutely mortified. But then we showed her the things she could have done to get out, and she absolutely lost it and broke down sobbing, saying, "Oh, I wish I would have known this several months ago."
Absolutely.
How sad that is.
Now, Stan, we've got a call. If you don't mind, we take this call here real quick. Hello, caller, are you there?
More or less.
Yes. What can we do for you, sir? What did you have something to say or question?
Well, yeah. I think you ought to be very careful. If you've got a firefight going on, regardless, I think you will find you will become a victim, and not necessarily the person who might be a belligerent, mixing it up with the police. But the police might take you as a belligerent.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, did you subscribe to the Rifleman of Chance?
Rifleman, NRA magazine. Yes, I do.
Okay. Years ago, they had an article. It was fairly interesting. Some grocer, they had a hold up at his butcher shop, but anyway, he ran out with an apron on, with a shotgun. All right, hey, of course he first called the police, and he was cut down. All right,
because he ran out with the gun.
Yep.
Yeah. No, great point. Thank you for the call, Harvey. We sure appreciate you bringing up those points.
Well, you got to remember that essentially you're getting into a situation like you brought out that you don't know who all's there. And,
exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Identification. Part of our
is the importance for situational awareness.
Thanks for the call, Harvey.
And I think Stan, I think that's what we really wanted to bring Stan on for, is to talk about situational awareness. I mean, he talked about his experience with the Board of Realtors and the lady who was not aware. She walked into a room first, no longer had an egress, no longer had any other solutions to get out.
Gave them the perfect opportunity.
She was not situationally aware. She was not thinking about that. And I think a lot of times, most of us will go into autopilot or go into safety mode where we're just operating and we're not actually aware of what we're doing or aware of what's going on around us.
Exactly. Kind of to the caller's point, we do cover that. We call it our verbal judo. And part of verbal judo is not only being commanding and domineering in a confrontation, but also identifying. If you are in a massive crowded area like a mall or something like that, and the schmuck does go down, you use your commanding voice to identify who you are. Now, with law enforcement, it's easy. We're shouting out, "Stop resisting!" Or if we're in SID clothing, plain clothes, and we're not wearing a uniform, we constantly identify ourselves. If we can't flash a badge, we are verbally identifying who we are over and over and over again, so anybody who shows up on scene doesn't go, "Oh, look at that guy. He's beating up that poor helpless guy. Let's get him," right? Because I've seen that where a plainclothes police officer is trying to arrest someone, and every good Samaritan thinks, "Oh, look at that man's beating up that poor guy. Let's go help him." And so then they start beating up on the police officer and helping the escape of a felon. So you constantly have to identify, and that's a very good point. Now, as far as situational awareness is that, don't put yourself in that situation. That's why the U.S. military dominates the world war theater, is because we have the intelligence gathering capabilities. That's the first part of UDA. Observe. We know exactly what we're going into before we get there. And that gives us the upper hand. Now, often when you're walking down the street, people, it cracks me up. Everyone's just so glued to their cell phone. Mm-hmm. They can barely make it across the curb without tripping. You know, what does that signify? When someone has a cell phone to their ear or they're looking down at their silly little screen, it just spells victim all over the place. And bad guys are looking for that. They're looking for people who are totally unaware. So if you're walking down the street focusing on a little screen, all he has to do is cold cock you and then take whatever he wants. And plus, he'll take your phone.
Yep. Well, I think the funniest thing is we just don't observe. And then we go, well, I can't believe I'm a victim. Mm-hmm. You know, we have the audacity to question the fact that we weren't paying attention. You know, I know we're almost into a break, but I think the important thing is for people to really just stop and look at where they are.
Exactly.
It's a good self-check, good gut check. You know, you're doing something. I challenge you, if you hear someone else's phone go off, stop, and I want you to look around and see how everyone else reacts, but where you are and what's going on. And if you've put yourself in a position where if that were an active shooter, you know, how would you be defending yourself? How would you get to a safe spot? I mean, it's just a simple drill, you know, and things that you would normally just ignore, try to pay attention to it and just kind of do a gut check, a self-check of awareness. Am I walking with my head down? Am I only focusing on my phone? Am I too busy hashtagging and tweeting to pay attention to what's going on in the world around me? Because now I've become a victim.
Now, Stan, after this break, I'd like to get into the practical things of what we can do to be more aware, more prepared to defend ourselves. You're listening to Prepper Talk Radio here on K-Talk, AM 630, and our sponsor is Survival Medical, survival-medical.com. Thanks for listening. We're going to come right back into the show. We've got a lot to talk about here. You're listening to Prepper Talk Radio here on AM 630 K-Talk, and we are, of course, brought to you by Survival Medical, survival-medical.com. The only first aid kit's tougher than nature, and we actually love these things and we use them.
You know, it's interesting because as a scoutmaster, we check bags every week to make sure that, or not every week, but before every camp out to make sure everybody has things. One of the most often overlooked things is their first aid kit. They'll be like, oh, yeah, I got a kit, and it's one of those little clamshell kits. Mm-hmm. They haven't opened it in years, and so we'll randomly check them because a lot of the ointments are dried up, or sometimes it's their older brother's kit that's just been handed down and they go bad. And that's the thing I like about Survival Medical is it doesn't go bad. It's sealed. It stays fresh longer. Well, it sounds funny. It stays fresh longer, but you can use it for a long time. And that's why we love Survival Medical. So survival-medical.com. They're a show sponsor, great friend, awesome product.
We are on here with Stan Pruett of Urban Survivors, and I'm going to ask you more about why you named it that way a little bit later on if we have the time. But I do have a caller here who has a really good question. I had this same question as well. This is Jason. Jason, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, okay, so I have a 13-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old granddaughter, and we've got them in jiu-jitsu, and the girls love it. They're fantastic, but it takes years to master jiu-jitsu. And quite frankly, I don't care if a 12-year-old has a black belt or not. You know, a 165-pound man can take him out really pretty easy. Can you kind of cover how effective your program is for children of that age set, that age group?
Yeah, it is. There's always going to be a disadvantage when it comes to size, and jiu-jitsu is awesome. We have a Korean-type jiu-jitsu called mulchigi, and when I have done MMA back in my younger days, before MMA was big, and also I've trained a lot of MMA fighters, and we fare very well against jiu-jitsu. And jiu-jitsu, I say, keep practicing. It's great stuff, and it'll teach them very sound basics of how to get out of situations. But when the schmuck hits the fan, so to say, and you're up against a larger opponent, you got to focus on cheating. There's no such thing as a fair fight. And martial arts always teaches you rules and regulations based on the sport of it. And jiu-jitsu is great, especially when it's one-on-one. in a controlled environment. That's why it's great, and it dominates the UFC, because you're in a ring and there's a referee and there's no eye gouging, there's no throat gouging and punching and crushing of the windpipe and destroying the gonads and things like that.
Pretty picture, Stan.
Yeah, well, but it's still a great way to fight. And so I say continue learning what you can. Yes, it does take time, but there are also some simple things you can do that will teach you how to cheat. Use weapons of opportunity. Even on your person, you have weapons on you: belts, shoes, pieces of jewelry, pens, pencils. All those things can be used in that defensive situation. So keep going with the jiu-jitsu. Bravo on that. But don't just limit it to that. Focus on what are the weapons of opportunity. What are the ways I can cheat? How can I destroy an opponent with my bare hands? Now, for example, there is such a thing called blood sport. Made popular by the movie of Van Damme. It is an illegal fighting circuit. It does go on. It's around the world, and these guys will meet on the black web, and they will go into these fights. They're no rules fights, and they meet at different places throughout the world, like old soccer stadiums or high school football fields, wherever. And they have cameras. You can find it on the internet, and there's a lot of money to be won in these fights. There's one video that I share. I think it's on my Urban Survivors Facebook page. But it's a fight in Malaysia in an old soccer field, and it's between a Muay Thai fighter and a U.S. Army Green Beret, retired Green Beret. And these two guys get together. There's a bunch of people kind of in a small crowd looking around, making sure, okay, there's no cops. And the referee says, fight. And in that first half a second, the Green Beret put his hand into a claw-like pattern and went straight for an eye gouge, destroying the guy's eyes. Fight was over. Wow. This Muay Thai fighter is a world championship, has been studying Muay Thai all his life. He has destroyed many opponents, and in less than half a second, the guy says, fight, and the Green Beret went wham, and just clawed him right in the eyes. The guy couldn't see. He fell to the ground in writhing and agonizing pain. Think about the eye. The eye can rupture very easily.
Oh, I'm very sensitive about my eyes.
Yeah, especially when you get a finger up in there.
Okay, so now that we know how to be absolutely lethal, well, we don't know, but we've heard of it, let's talk about the situational awareness.
So in situational awareness, that's your state of mind, and it's a habit that you get to not be distracted by the little things, the cell phones or whatever. You've got to be constantly surveying and looking around you for what is a potential threat. Where are your egresses? Where are your bottlenecks? Where are your vantage points? I mean, some people say, "Man, Stan, you're like totally paranoid." No, I'm not. I'm not paranoid at all. In fact, the only thing I fear is God. And so if you have that mentality that I am just prepared, when I go into a restaurant, right, I'm constantly scanning. This comes from being a police officer for 12 years. You're constantly scanning people to see who's packing, who's not packing, who's a threat, who's not a threat, where are my egresses, where are the exits. And when I sit my family down, I prefer a bench. And from that bench, I always make sure that I'm on the outside, so my family is protected inside, and I have easy ability to get up and respond accordingly to any threat. And I want to have my visuals towards the entrance, so I can see who's coming in and who's coming out. And same with the theater, movie theater. Usually the best seats are right in the middle and up high, right? Well, if the schmuck hits the fan, that's the worst place to be.
Yeah, you're stuck.
Yeah, you're in the center of the target.
Yeah, so it's things you need to think about. And people go, well, man, Stan, you're just like totally paranoid. No, if the opportunity ever presents itself, I want every advantage in my back pocket. Warfare, combat, hand-to-hand is not about how skilled you are. It's about how well you cheat. and you've got to have every advantage to yourself. So I've got to have the high ground, I've got to have the egress, I've got to have the cover, I've got to have the weapons of opportunity or the bigger gun. I've got to have all these things on my side to win. Otherwise, I will be a victim.
Well, it sounds like the way you're describing is you're kind of a opportunistic opportunist. I know it's redundant, but or not optimist, opportunistic optimist. You're taking every opportunity to provide a better outcome, and then you're positive about it because you've trained, you've developed these skills. But I think a lot of us, where do we start? How do we start thinking that way? A lot of us I think are wondering, okay, well, how do I be more aware, or how do I train myself to be more aware? What are some things you tell your students to start training?
My question is it the right place to start to go get your concealed permit and start carrying? Is that the right place to start?
That's a wonderful place to start, but don't stop there. You've got to go learn how to deploy that weapon, and it's not just about range time, because those black silhouettes at the 25-yard line are not really much of a threat. Several reasons. One, they're not shooting back. Two, they don't move.
Yep.
Right? And so when we do, and we'll be doing this at PrepperCon, when we do this with airsoft guns to practice people, we'll put the airsoft gun in their holster or in their concealed, which is even worse, and we'll pose a threat at the 18-foot to 20-foot area. And so it's amazing at how many times you'll fumble to get your pistol out, you don't have target acquisition, and there's a guy sticking a knife into your throat before you have it even out of your holster.
Great point.
And also those targets may be shooting back. How many times on the range do we forget about our cover? We've practiced over and over again drawing and shooting on that target. Well, you draw and shoot. Well, what if he's shooting back, or what if he's shooting first? What do you do then? We're so used to the same stance, the same habit, and just sticking our arms out there and shooting away at some guy or some silhouette, and we don't realize that silhouette is actually a hostile and is not going to be just passively sitting there.
So let's switch back, because my initial question completely got hijacked and derailed.
Oh, sorry.
So how do we train ourselves to be situationally aware?
It started for me when I was young. My father did this to me. He would play the what-if game, all right? So we'd be on a hike, and he'd say, Stan, what if there was an earthquake right now? What would you do? Mm-hmm. And it taught me to look around and go, okay, well, I'm amongst a whole bunch of trees. This is not a good place to be during an earthquake. I want to find clearing. Or during a lightning storm, what would you do? He's always playing the what if. We're driving down the highway, and he'd say, Stan, what if? And he'd just catch me off guard. It was a fun game. He'd say, what if there's a tornado? Okay, Dad, I would do this, I would do this, I would do this. And we kind of discuss it and talk about it. So you can start with things like that, constantly either with yourself or with your spouse or friend or whatever. Play the what-if game. And it's kind of fun to come up with the scenarios, like you're downtown, and this actually happened. You're downtown in a big high-rise, between high-rise buildings, and this happened in Denver. There's a tornado coming through. What do you do? Okay, well, glass is starting to fall. The building windows are starting to shatter. It's really difficult to run into a building when there's all this glass coming down. So what do you do? So we play this what-if scenario, and it became such a habit that it was fun to always walk around going, okay, what would I do if it's an earthquake or a tornado, or suddenly there's a car careening out of control, or there's a shooter, or there's a guy mugging someone, or a guy walks up to me and tries to punch me. What am I going to do? So one, our senses have to be keen, and we have to kind of tune those.
Okay.
Visually identify things, and then play the memorization game. As you walk down the street, scan people. You've seen it in the Terminator, right? Mm-hmm. How his computer eyeballs going scanning people, and he's scanning weapons and what they're carrying. Do that. Not to the point where you're, being a creepy old man and women are going, hey, that guy's checking me out. But do it so that you notice people, what they're carrying and what they're doing. And then as you pass them, check back and say, what color was her handbag? Mm-hmm. What did she have in her hand? Quiz yourself. And then you start developing a keen sense of observation, Otherwise, we passively walk down the road, and we don't recognize anything. And when a cop comes to a crime scene and they say, "Well, what was the guy wearing?" I don't know. What race was he? I don't know. We're that unobservant. We have to become more observant to the point where people say, "Hey, that guy walking by, what color were his eyes?" His eyes were blue. Mm-hmm. What did his ball cap say? It said Nike, right? So once you start developing that keen sense of observation, you become the Jason Bourne, right? That is he. Even though he's a fictional character, he is the perfect example of Uda. He's also the perfect example of situational awareness and being calm, cool, and collected during any situation. He's constantly scanning, right? He's checking everything out. He knows who's packing, who's not. He knows where he's going, what he's doing. He grabs a map on the side so he knows where the exits are. That's where we need to be. And it starts with simple things like that.
Now, for those who are just joining in, can you explain what UDA is one more time?
Yes, UDA is an acronym for Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act. So you observe and see what's going on, orient yourself so you don't run off the wrong direction or do something that gets you in more trouble.
So you're not running into the gunfire when you're trying to run away from the gunfire.
Exactly.
Know where your exits are.
Exactly. Decide and then act. So, of course, if you already know where the exits are, that makes you that much more of an asset because you're ready to go. So back to special operations. The more information you have on your mission, the better you will perform. And so everywhere you go, the more information you have when you walk into that bank and you know where everything is, the better you are. So when you walk into a bank, most people are funneling through their wallet or their purse looking for their card and their ID or their check or whatever like that. When I walk in there, I don't worry about that because I know I'll get to that when I get up to the teller, but I'll walk in and I quickly do a scan. Is there security guards? Where are all the cameras? Who's all in there? Who looks like a potential threat? What makes good cover? And again, there's a difference between concealment and cover. So many people think, well, I'll just flip that table over and I'll hide behind that table.
Yeah, absolutely. And, unfortunately, we are out of time. We could, like you can hear, we can go on and on for hours. And we so appreciate you, Stan, coming on. And maybe we'll continue this in a future episode. But thank you for listening to Prepper Talk Radio. And thank you, Survival Medical, for being our sponsor, survival-medical.com. The only first aid kit tougher than nature. We'll catch you guys next week.